Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it's with enormous pride that I rise to make a contribution on the Net Zero Economy Authority Bill 2024. This is an incredibly important bill, not just for Australia as a whole, but in particular for my region, the mighty Hunter region and Central Coast. I'm proud of the contribution my region makes to our nation. We provide fully 25% of the nation's electricity. We've got Vales Point Power Station in my electorate. We've got Kalonga Gas Station in my electorate, which is the largest gas-fired power station in New South Wales. Over the other side of the lake, we've got a Raring Power Station, which is the largest power station in the country. And up the valley, we've got Bayswater. We've also got the proud contribution that Lake Mora and Wangi Power Stations contributed in their day. We truly power this nation and we industrialise this nation on a period of cheap coal-fired electricity in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, running into the 80s. That is the contribution the Hunter has made historically, and we continue to make a contribution massive in proportion today. But the truth is, Mr Deputy Speaker, those power stations have either retired or will soon retire due to the age of the plant. Vales Point Power Station was built in the late 1960s, Raring in the early 1980s, Bayswater in the late 1970s. We have already had Lake Mora Power Station closed down. These power stations are reaching the end of their technical life, not because of government policy, but because of base engineering. So the question, Deputy Speaker, is what do we do as a government, what do we do as a nation to honour the commitment of the workers and communities based upon them and look after them? Because the truth is we had thousands of megawatts of coal-fired electricity closed down under the last government without adequate support. And the most stark example of that is Hazelwood Power Station, that closed with less than 5 months' notice and threw hundreds of workers and contractors out without adequate support. An activist Victorian government intervened to look after some of them, but the truth is we should have and could have done much more, and that's what this bill is all about, and that's why I'm so proud of it. At the heart of this bill is the pooled redundancy model for displaced power station workers and workers in captured coal mines associated with those power stations. We've got a choice here, Deputy Speaker. We can repeat the errors of the past in Australia. We can go down the route that we've seen in other countries, for example, what happened to coal mining in places like Appalachia in the United States, or we can be much more progressive, much more interventionist, recognising the structural inequity and the challenges that face regions like mine when we see mass redundancy events. And I'm all for one for intervention to support my community, looking at the model that the German governments, both left and right, Christian Democratic and Social Democratic, participated in over 40 years in the German coal mining industry, where they went from hundreds of thousands of employees in coal mining in the 1950s to ending black coal mining a couple of years ago without a single forced redundancy. So that's why the pooled redundancy aspect of this legislation is so important. And the legislation gives the authority roles around bringing forward the Energy Industry Jobs Plan, which involves meeting with workers on the ground to understand their needs, connecting them with training, financial advice and other individual supports, helping the transition to alternate jobs, and by offering participation in the redeployment scheme. This is critical to giving workers associated with these power stations these opportunities when they close down because of the commercial decisions of the power station owners, not because of governments, but because of commercial decisions by the owners of those power stations. And that's an incredibly important role for this authority. I pay tribute to the Mining and Energy Union for the leadership on this issue for decades, and I'll return to that in a second. Their leadership has driven this process, and I'm proud of the small role that I was privileged to play in the design of some of these policies when I had some of the shadow ministerial responsibilities. That's one aspect of this bill that is so critical. The other aspect of this bill that is critical is about the future economic opportunities of how do we grow more manufacturing jobs in this country. Just as this country industrialised on cheap coal-fired power in the 1950s and 60s, we can grow even more manufacturing jobs on the basis of cheap renewable energy in the next few decades. That can drive a new generation of manufacturing. It's a fact, Deputy Speaker, that over 90% of the world's photovoltaic cells are based on technology developed at the world's best research institution for PV, which is the University of New South Wales, in my mate, the member for Kingston Smith's electorate. Yeah. Great world-breaking research that is on the roofs around the world. But the truth is that we got zero manufacturing jobs out of that because the Howard government allowed that technology to be sent overseas without any attempts to commercialise it here and generate a world-scale manufacturing industry. That cannot be allowed to happen again as we look at the next generations of renewable energy industry. So that's why our policies are so important. We have 50% of the world's lithium resources, but we export it mostly in a raw form overseas. We need to be transforming it in this country, valuating and growing more manufacturing jobs. And that's why this new authority, with its focus on managing economic change, complements the $40 billion in government initiatives to reduce emissions and become a renewable energy superpower. They include the $20 billion Rewiring the Nation program to modernise our electricity grid, the $1.9 billion Powering the Regions Fund, and a $6 billion critical minerals facility. I'm particularly passionate about the green hydrogen opportunities. We should be the world's best place to make green hydrogen, and we should be the best place in the world to combine that green hydrogen with our great iron ore resources and making green steel. I want to see the Hunter Valley, Newcastle in particular, making steel for decades to come. And the Grattan Institute's report into green steel a few years ago demonstrated the opportunities in this area where we can compete and win green steel opportunities. Because the truth is that these new opportunities won't be generated in places like North Sydney or South Bank. They will be in our regions. Projects that decarbonise industrial facilities and build new industries will grow the future economic base of regions like my own Hunter Valley, the Gladstone region, the Latrobe Valley and the Upper Spencer Gulf. And I was so proud to be at the old Liddell Power Station site last month for the launch of our Solar Sunshot program, which focused on building manufacturing jobs, building solar photovoltaic cells. And the truth is that one company there that we're partnering with will employ more people at that site than the Liddell Power Station employed at its prime. So that is incredibly important for our community. We must seize these economic opportunities. We have a great opportunity right now to harness this clean energy industrial revolution. We need to learn the lessons from past industrial revolutions where you do need an interventionist government to drive this process. You cannot leave it to the market unaided because all the technology will be shipped offshore. We will lose the critical competitive advantages we have. So this is why this bill is so critical to a region like mine, and it's why I'm profoundly proud of it. In conclusion, I do want to pay tribute to a couple of actors in this process. I've already thanked the Mining and Energy Union, but in particular I want to call out Tony Marr, a person who's committed decades of service to fighting for his workers, both in the mining industry, the coal mining industry in particular, and the energy sector. Yeah. And this bill is his legacy. Yeah. This bill shows his pragmatism, but his commitment to looking after his members and his community, and I pay tribute to him and all the other activists in the MEU for their role in driving this conversation and this achievement. I also want to pay tribute to my mentor Greg Conroy in his role as the first chair of the Net Zero Economy Authority. He set the groundwork for this. He did great work on this. This topped off decades of contribution to fighting for workers in our country, in particular in regions like mine, and I want to thank Greg for his service in this role and wish him the best of luck in his future role with the Future Fund. This bill is incredibly important to our nation, it's incredibly important to our region, and I commend it to the House. While I'm talking about jobs and services in my community, I do want to quickly express my disappointment in Australia Post closing down the licensed post office at Windale. This was a voluntary process through the Australia Post buyback process, but I am concerned about the loss of postal services in my community. I've met with the Minister for Communications and we're working very hard to maintain postal services in Windale, which is a beautiful part of my community. Thank you very much.